good evening, social media family. How are you tonight? I'm very excited to continue our discussion with a very special guest, sister friend to me. I wanted to say Dr. Rosalind, but pardon me. Rosalind Thomas is joining me tonight to continue our discussion on mental health and wellness. For those that have joined us last week, you are familiar with her and what we were talking about last week. So we're going to jump right in. Thank you for those that are coming on and will catch the replay. Do me a favor as you come in, like, love, and share. This is a subject matter that needs more attention, more discussions, more opportunities to put ourselves out there in a safe environment so that we can make sure that we are becoming the best version of who we were meant to be, who the Lord has made us to be in the earth, and that we're treating each other, one another, each other, the way that we are supposed to, and that we're walking in the wellness and fullness and wholeness that we were created to um, uh, receive from the Lord. But without further ado, I want to jump right in to the conversation, give Ron an opportunity to greet you and let us know that you are on and you can hear us clearly in the comments. We're going to talk about mental health and trauma. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or direct message me them privately if you prefer not to be known. I won't repeat a name. Whoever shares the question, I will never do that. But I want Roz to go ahead and introduce herself and we will jump right in.
Good evening. My name is Rosalind Thomas, and like I shared last week, I am a mental health counselor, and it is a joy to be here with you tonight talking about mental health, something that I am very passionate about. So thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, we're just going to jump right into the deep waters tonight, just talking about how trauma uh,
Mhm.
affects the mental health. And I know that you do have some things that you want to share. So I want to give you the opportunity to do that. We're going to be on for about 30 minutes tonight. So as she is speaking, sharing, if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments so that she can respond. Or if she says something that kind of sparks your interest or you want her to elaborate a little bit on, feel free to share that. But if you want to go ahead and just take the reins and give us the backdrop of how trauma literally affects mental health.
Okay. Okay, so I do want to start just based where we were last week and to
Mhm.
build upon that just a little bit and explaining, gave a definition of mental health and some things that we can do to continue to improve our mental health. And then being able to build on that and just talking about some effects of trauma and what that does to our mental health. And pardon me if you see me looking, I have my notes pulled up. Okay. And so going into that, discussing trauma, and the first thing I like to do is just give a definition of trauma. And the one definition of trauma, an emotional response to a terrible event. Now, that
Good.
terrible event, I'm sure, our imagination can take us in many different places where a terrible event can take place. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, car accidents, and so on. And so with that trauma, our emotional response to a terrible like event. And so three different types that I wanted to talk about tonight. One is acute trauma, where it's a single event that can take place in, like, for example, being in a car accident. The next one is chronic trauma. And with chronic trauma, it's prolonged exposure to a traumatic event. And that could range from anything. I don't want to just throw things out there. I'm very careful. Also, complex trauma. And with complex trauma, it is a single event, but it's so devastating that it's a devastating that it has long-term effects. And so those are three different forms of trauma that take place with individuals daily. None of us are exempt from trauma. And so learning how trauma impacts our mental health and also being able to do things with ourselves, like we mentioned last week, self-care and other things, to be
Mhm,
able to help us when we're going through difficult times.
mhm,
Now, towards the end, I did have some things that I wanted to share in regard to more self-care, more learning, knowing when to reach out for assistance.
yes.
But before we get to that part, did you want to say anything about what I just shared?
I was trying to jot some notes down, but I didn't capture everything. And usually, Mary is on here tonight, and she sometimes captures everything. But I like what you said. I believe, if I wrote it correctly, that trauma is an emotional response to a terrible life event. Did I catch that?
Yeah, an emotional response to a terrible event. Yep.
A terrible event, and then there was a chronic trauma, and then it was a complex trauma.
Hmm.
Can you give us a brief synopsis overview of each one? So, if you don't address one form of trauma, is it possible for it to turn into those other types of trauma? And the reason for me saying that is because when occurrence happens, like right away, would you recommend that you go and seek help or counsel treatment like immediately? Because some, and like what is categorized as trauma? Because sometimes we can get our feelings hurt,
Hmm.
people, a bad relationship, a parental occurrence. So, can you give us an example of what a traumatic event is and the type that you should not delay in receiving some, help for? Because sometimes we're strong and oh, I can handle this, and then it begins to fester. You
Hmm.
don't get it addressed, whatever that trauma is, and you don't realize how it has affected you
Hmm.
until you respond emotionally. And then there are things that are called triggers. I know that, you
Hmm.
know from reading and then personal experience too.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
triggers because you don't deal with it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, if you can advise us from that aspect.
Yeah, so going the acute trauma, the first one that I shared, um, examples of that would be exposure to a single event,
Okay,
a single overwhelming event,
got
um,
it. Okay,
car accidents, natural disaster, um,
okay,
death of a loved one.
yeah.
That that can be considered as an acute trauma because it's a single event.
Mhm.
Move down to the chronic trauma result, it comes from overexposure to traumatizing situations. And
Okay,
traumatizing situations, an example of that, it could be bullying, it could be profound neglect,
okay,
extended period of violence, it could be that. And then we go to complex trauma. And the complex trauma, it is from a single traumatic event, but its effects are long lasting. And for
okay.
that one, when accident, a car accident with fatalities involved.
Mm,
Another one, I'll leave it at that one. Yeah, I don't want to give the other examples. But I can't say in regard to each person is different.
okay.
And so that is one thing that, and learning about trauma, um, also being human, that each person is different in how they respond to trauma.
Okay.
Their response has to do with their background, their support, and just a host of other things.
Yeah.
And so, because they're so different, each person responds to trauma so differently, then
Mm,
suggesting that as soon as the trauma happens, you reach out for help, you reach out for help. I
okay.
can't say that. I would like to say that it's individual based. So
Okay.
where some people might respond to immediately seeking out help,
Yeah.
others may not respond to that immediately, and a little bit longer
Yeah.
they may go and want to seek out help. So I do think it's individually based. Um,
Okay.
I do, like I said last week, I am a huge proponent of therapy, of course, but
Right. See?
but
I wonder why. No. It's only by profession, right?
right.
Passion, right. See people well,
Yes,
heal, whole, yeah.
yes, yes. So with all of that, I just I would encourage it, but again, it does depend on the individual and where they are in their life to know if they need that at that moment
Mhm.
or if they can wait. But I do believe it's individual based.
Yeah, because I think that's a great, great, great definitions for all of those. And and then it just takes me back to our conversation we had last week about
Mhm,
certain things not being introduced to
mhm.
us, certain communities for whatever reason, but
Yeah.
for this to not be our norm. And
Mhm,
sometimes you may not even know you need, help,
mhm,
because we're
mhm,
not accustomed to receiving counsel or receiving
mhm,
therapy, seeing a
mhm,
psychologist,
mhm.
psychiatrist. It's just not the norm. And so there are these occurrences that happen.
Yeah.
And I can think of traumatic events. I know you did name some, and we're not going to name any, but there are traumatic events that people go through, and sometimes you don't want to talk about it,
Right.
to anybody because of the embarrassment. We may not even be the one that was the perpetuating the
Mhm,
occurrence, but there's like embarrassment, attached to if I share this with anyone, they may look at me differently. I
yeah.
may become a topic of discussion.
Mhm,
But again, finding a safe space, safe person, safe
mhm,
place. And I believe that can be found, of course, in the clergyman, your church
mhm,
environment,
mhm,
pastor,
mhm,
perhaps, or
mhm,
medical professions. I'm a huge proponent, and this is just has been over the past few years of
mhm,
seeking out
mhm,
professional
mhm,
counsel, because I believe it's neutral. They don't know you,
mhm.
most of the time they don't know you.
Right.
I think their assessment of you has nothing to do with
Mhm,
um, how you may have behaved as a child, although they take their notes, but they haven't observed those
mhm.
things about you. So I believe their responses are not biased based
Right.
upon those type of things. So
Mhm.
this is good, and I'm just and when I would go live, I would say often when I'm talking about subject matters,
Right.
I believe in prayer,
Mhm,
I believe in deliverance, having a relationship with the Lord. I believe in counsel. I believe in therapy. I
mhm,
wholeheartedly, and I have not always talked openly, didn't even know about it
mhm.
until, literally, how you know of a thing, but
Uh-huh.
there's just like, oh no, I can't tell anyone I saw a counselor or therapist.
Yes.
But there are so many people that are on, social media,
Mhm,
celebrities or
mhm,
people even in the Christian
mhm,
sphere of influence that
mhm,
are well known, and they talk about that they have therapists, have received therapy, and it's
mhm.
in books. And I'm like, okay, this is normal. It doesn't mean that something is like, I mean, something is, a little out of order, but
Mhm.
sometimes the attachment is like, you're not right.
Yeah,
Something is just
yeah.
like not right up in here. Then you're labeled as
Yes.
being something when it could just be a lot of issues that you've
Mhm.
just held on to, have not talked about, and
Mhm.
they're coming forth and they're manifesting through your behavior. So
Yes.
it's not always who we really are. And I believe, and you can probably speak to this, once you get to the like core of that person's being,
Mhm,
somebody may be mean, angry,
mhm,
short, not able to love,
mhm.
um, not um, very friendly, and sometimes that's just your personality. But
Yeah.
I'm speaking from
Mhm,
trauma and
mhm.
you're not your necessarily your makeup, but because of things that you've experienced that have caused you to be that way, or you're suspicious, you become
Uh-huh.
a little like a little paranoia, like
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
that can be open when
Mhm.
you don't deal with um, just hurts and pains and
Yeah.
trauma
Yeah.
if it's allowed to fester. I think
Mhm.
so. I
Yeah,
think
I do agree. I do think, and speaking on it not being known or some
yeah,
communities not understanding the value of it, maybe not being introduced to it, and
yeah,
then going throughout life experiencing trauma after trauma, and maybe some behaviors are displayed that you may not know where it's coming from. But I do agree that in certain areas we do need to increase the awareness of mental health, and
yeah.
specifically as well how trauma impacts our mental health. And
Mhm.
so some of the ways that trauma can impact our mental health, um, you know, big terms, depression,
Okay.
um, isolation. We don't even have to just not wanting to be around others as often.
Yeah.
Um, Eating, sleeping. Um, so going back to the trauma definition and speaking about how it impacts our mental health, it can impact it physically as well as emotionally.
Yeah.
And sometimes physically with our bodies, we may start to feel fatigue. Sometimes we may experience aches and pains,
Mhm.
or some form of headache, maybe nausea, different things we may experience,
Okay.
or emotionally, where we experience the, like I mentioned earlier, the isolation, the not wanting to be bothered, feeling like something is wrong with you,
Mhm.
not having hope, not wanting to go on, and kind of just shrinking back.
Yeah.
And earlier you did ask the question, when do we know if we should seek out help? And I do think when it gets to a place where we're isolating ourselves, where we cannot show up for ourselves. We cannot get up. We cannot do anything that what we normally did before.
Yeah.
It's a drastic change in our behavior, and we just can't quite get back to it no matter how hard we try. Then it
Right.
may be beneficial for us to be able to seek out some help.
Yeah.
But those are just some ways where, and I wrote down so many more ways where it can impact our mental health.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I just want to share is when we notice those differences, and
Mhm.
we can't show up for ourselves.
Yeah.
um, and reaching out for help, I do think um, that's the best place to start.
Okay.
Hmm.
And even being as you were speaking so much, and we do have a little bit more time, so feel free to drop
Hmm.
those nuggets, drop that wisdom
You
that you have.
can.
Even when you say when you know that things are not the way they should be in your own life, to reach out. But what about when you're so caught up in it, and then someone else may say, you should probably talk to somebody, even being receptive to when someone else is making a suggestion or recommendation, that may
Hmm.
be hard to hear, you
Yeah.
from somebody like and understanding that they're saying it out of concern,
Hmm.
even, I think it's good to have these discussions before, and you shared, about speaking to the children, toddlers,
Hmm.
old enough to
Hmm.
understand at a particular age before you become a full grown adult. And so, we get set in our ways. So can't nobody
Hmm.
say nothing. This is how I am. What is it? It's like this is who I am. So
Mhm.
excellent way. But
Mhm.
again, your life experiences, I really believe that they shape your mentality, your perception.
Absolutely,
It
absolutely.
really does. So even being open to
Mhm.
outside observers on
Yes.
something different,
Mhm.
and even
Yeah.
speaking up, because sometimes we see things, but we
Mhm.
don't say nothing.
Yeah.
Because we think we may offend somebody, we may hurt somebody. So, like, how do you know when to say something? If you should say something, do you just pray about it, or do you? Yeah, how can you address it if you see somebody and you're like, you know what, you're just not the same person you used to be? Do you need to be in a relationship with them? Can you
I
just be an
believe so.
acquaintance? Okay.
I believe so, and I don't think it's just a surface level relationship either. And again, going back to individual based,
Yeah. Okay.
so at its core, individually based.
Yeah.
But I would like to also add on to that,
Mhm.
um, relationship.
Okay.
Maybe I would be able to hear something from someone that I'm in close relationship with, as opposed to a stranger on the street, because that person, especially if it's a loving, respectful relationship, not meaning to bring me harm or anything like that, I absolutely believe relationship has to be involved, because we may not even want to hear it from the person we're in relationship with. We
Ooh, that
definitely
part.
want
That part.
it from somebody else.
Like you're treading on thin ice. Like, wait, I've just concerned,
Mhm.
but if this conversation is the norm,
Mhm.
then I think we would be more receptive, like,
Mhm.
whatever spheres of influence, in our small groups, in our women's groups and men's groups and
Mhm.
young adults group. I think that I strongly believe that it should be included, like, every year. Of
Yeah.
course, I think every quarter,
Mhm.
a mental health professional should come, and this is my opinion,
Mhm.
in the workplace and in the church and in schools,
Mhm.
elementary, what is
Mhm.
it?
Middle
It's
school, high
school,
school.
yeah, I know it's different in the city and the suburbs, the high school,
Mhm.
universities. Not
Mhm.
saying that they don't have it,
Right.
but I really think it should be a part of the curriculum.
Mhm. Yeah.
I really do, because we see things that happening on the news and
Mhm.
the newspaper,
Mhm.
and I believe, it has a lot to do with, and people, they say that because of the parents, a lack of guidance from the parents, or things that happen in the home, and I believe all of that,
Mhm.
to a certain degree, especially I'm a parent myself, so I can't blame you gonna say the parents' fault, the parents' fault, but you don't know what type of values those
Mhm.
parents or that parent has instilled in their child, or sometimes they make a decision to go
Mhm.
a different route. But I think the earlier, the sooner it's done, these
Oh,
conversations
yes.
are had. I mean, I don't know if we have to write a children's book,
Mm.
and I may be dropping something out for somebody
There's
just to
some.
talk about, mental health and wellness, and make it lighthearted. Although it's a serious topic, bring it down to their level. Like you share, go back and catch the replay for those that may not know what I'm talking about at this moment. And it's on Facebook and it's on YouTube. But yeah, I really want, I feel like it's normal now over the past, I would say, what, 5 years, we've talked
Mhm.
more about mental health
Yes.
and
Mhm.
wellness. But
Mhm.
without, and I've been, thank the Lord, been around for a long time. And this is like new to me, but that should not, be the case.
Mhm.
I know everything has a time and a place and all of that, but
Mhm.
now moving forward, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to, say, okay, let's Lord God, open up a door so
Yeah.
that we can have access,
Mhm. Mhm.
to the various places we mentioned, but even starting where we're at, our sphere of influence, our communities.
Yes.
Okay, I'm availing myself, I can come as a consultant. This is my
Mhm.
fee rate, however, whatever the case, because it's needed. We don't
Yeah.
want to hear any uh, sad stories or difficult stories of
Right.
that happened because of this, that, and the other. I mean, if we can intervene and direct people to the right places, the right resources, let's be those people.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. I know I will put in the comments some things that people can do
Hmm.
when they notice perhaps maybe they are impacted by a traumatic event, and
Okay.
or maybe that event impacted them more than they thought it would.
Okay.
So I'll put some of those things in the comments for people to just be able to have um, for themselves.
Right. Okay.
Mhm.
Excellent. 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 You can hear our passion coming through.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And I
Yeah.
like, there was a comment, build a level of trust,
Oh,
and
yes.
people will listen. And I
Mhm.
think, the person who made that comment could be that she has been a proponent of relationships and strengthening relationships and having um, real conversations, not
Yes.
just when you feel like having the conversation, but even when you don't feel like it, and talking about most things,
Mhm.
that can happen in a relationship, and
Mhm.
bringing up, mental wellness.
Mhm.
If you are in relationship with somebody, okay,
Mhm.
can we have a discussion, on
Mhm.
mental wellness? What does that look like? I want you to know that I'm here for you, and you're here for me. And
Mhm.
if you see me going off, to the left, to the right, or saying things or acting out of character, can you like pull me to the side or coattail and be like, are you okay?
Mhm.
If you're not okay, go talk to someone. So even infusing it into the conversations,
Yes.
your your sister friends and your children, and
Yeah.
that's something, like I said, it's been about 5 years that
Mhm.
I will, ask certain questions,
Yeah.
like how are you mentally, emotionally,
Yeah.
spiritually,
Mhm.
I cover all of the bases. Now, whether or not they choose to say is up
Right.
to them, but they know that, I am a safe space.
Mhm.
I can't necessarily advise from the mental health professional vantage
Uh-huh.
point, but as a pastor, I could, advise them biblically, but
Mhm.
I will always slip up in there, go get you some help. I'm not trying to take the place of a medical professional
Mhm.
at all. I
Mhm.
am a strong believer in getting professional help.
Okay. Yeah.
As you have experienced a traumatic event and
Mhm.
it's lingering, there is um, one of our children, they work in the medical field,
Mhm.
emergency room, and some of the things that they were sharing
Mhm.
could really, affect you in
Yeah,
a particular way.
absolutely.
And I'm sure doctors and general nurses, when the
Mhm.
pandemic hit, and I hope that that'll be a discussion maybe in the future, like
Okay.
how traumatic events have affected us and our relationships.
Oh,
Lot
yeah.
of things
Oh,
a lot
absolutely.
of things have
Mhm.
changed. And I'm like, that's a question I was asking, my husband, like,
Mhm.
can we talk about this? Like, people have changed. And
Yeah.
I'm even trying to back up a little bit, you're not as relational and
Mhm.
interactive as they caring and
Mhm.
patient, you
Yeah.
and long suffering as
Mhm.
they used to be. And
Yeah.
then like I had a moment like we have, or maybe he said it, I don't want to take credit for that. We
Mhm.
were in a pandemic,
Mhm.
some of us have had loss at the
Mhm.
start of the pandemic. Some of us have had, me personally,
Mhm.
loss, not because of, this COVID-19, but
Mhm.
just during this time frame. And it does just shift you and
Yeah.
it causes you to rethink and reevaluate some things. So I don't know if you can speak to that or if there's one more point you want to share from your notes before we bring this session to a close.
Sure. That is a topic that we can discuss coming up because that in itself is a lot to unpack. Like each of these topics are a lot to unpack,
Yeah.
but that is something that we can absolutely discuss on our future lives.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Someone did put a comment there.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to read it after we're done.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, but I would love to talk about that, just how this pandemic has shifted
Yeah, yeah.
things. 'Cause that's trauma, in itself, to hear
Yes.
news constantly, to
Hmm.
be some people had to be, were forced to take the vaccination or
Hmm.
their job.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's been a shift,
Yeah.
so, I'm sure the medical professionals may have seen more, than they had probably in the past, what, 4 or 5 years, just more an uptick in office visits or virtual visits as
Oh,
someone,
yeah.
put here, in the comments. So does anyone have a question before we, uh, close out this session? Rosalind will be with us for the rest of the month. She will actually be a guest host for me next week. I'll be traveling, so she and Nancy Jeffries, who also has a heart passion
Hmm.
minister or to speak to uh,
Hmm.
people. Social work is her background as well. So I'm looking forward to reviewing their discussion on next week. I believe it'll be Tuesday at about 5:30. About
Yes.
5:30. So
Hmm.
if you have any questions, we're going to move on. So there wasn't any. Did you have one last statement you wanted to share? You'll hold that for.
No, that's what I'm gonna put in the comments.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm gonna put in the comments.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We pray that something was said that
Mm.
ministered to you or encouraged you, strengthened you, or prompted you to do something about, what may be going on the inside of you or those around you. And Sister Tamika Rothan will go back and read your conversation, read your comment, and she'll respond. I don't know if tonight or sometime this week to you. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you feeling comfortable enough. And we can take it down once it's read. If you want to, I'll read it, reread it. I'm trying to read it as I'm talking. And if it is something quite personal, I will remove it, but after we've read it. So, but if that is it,
All
thank you
right.
so much for joining us tonight. Conversations with Yolanda. The November series is mental health and
Mhm.
wellness. And again, any questions, feel free to direct message me. I will not say your name on the live, but Rosalind is available to respond to you here when we go live if you do submit a question. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And